The wheel of time turns, and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. The Wheel of Time turns and podcasts come and go. Welcome to WOTCast, a Wheel of Time book and watch club. We are reading through Robert Jordan's epic fantasy series and watching Amazon's Wheel of Time TV show. I'm Caleb Wimble, and with me are my co-host, Keeley Frank.
Hello.
And returning friend of the show, joining us to talk about the TV show, Nick Wicks.
Hey, guys.
You can find us at WOTCast.net and support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast. Your support means a lot. Even $2 at the Two Rivers tier helps. Join us on Patreon at the $5 Tar Valon tier, and you'll get access to special bonus episodes coming out on a regular basis. Email us questions, comments, and corrections via contact@wotcast.net with the subject line questions. We will answer those here on the show. Send them in. We'll talk about them. Last time, we talked about chapters 41 to 45 of The Eye of the World, which is appropriate because it covers a lot of the ground that we're going to be talking about on this episode. We saw our party reunited at last in the book. The touching reunion didn't last long because we learned the Dark One was close to reaching out of his prison and seizing the titular Eye of the World, whose power will be enough to break him free. This episode, we're talking about episode 6 of the Wheel of Time TV show, which covers mostly the same events, but with some major twists and differences. This episode is called The Flame of Tar Valon. It was written by Justine Jewel Gilmer, directed by Sally Richardson Whitfield, and developed, as always, by Rafe Judkins. So we opened this episode with a young girl and her father, who are fishers by trade. We haven't met either of these characters yet up till this point. They wake and they go about their day. We learn the young girl can channel. Then someone burns their house down for it because channelers are not tolerated in Tyr, where they live. The father sends the girl away to the White Tower, and we learn she is none other than Siuan Sanche, the present-day Amyrlin Seat and leader of all Aes Sedai. What did y'all think of this opening? Did it take you aback realizing this was where we were going, or did you see the preview last week for this episode so you knew exactly where it was going to take us character-wise?
So I didn't see the preview for this next episode, but as soon as she was on camera, I knew who it was just from all the other trailers and stuff with the, I don't know, are they tattoos or something that the Amyrlin Seat has?
Oh, yeah.
So
I think those are specific to her culture, it seems, like because her dad has matching ones. It sort of reminded me of like maybe if not Maori, then some sort of like South Pacific Islander tattoos, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, well, like that's who they're showing. And then I was just so surprised at how like well she could use the power, being so young. However old she was supposed to be, I assumed like 12, but I couldn't really tell.
Yeah, which feeds into. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I thought it was pretty good background on how Siuan got there, because in the books, it's really important that she's from the fishing village. She's known for using all her, like, fishing, analogies and expressions, so I thought it was a good way to introduce the character.
Even though from where we are in the book's perspective, we have not met Siuan Sanche, and I'm not even 100% sure we've heard her name in The Eye of the World. Okay, so Nick, you're the one who's most recently read most of the series. Is she yet another person being brought from the Great Hunt back in? Is that where she first shows up in person? Where
Siuan shows up in person?
Yeah. Is she even...
No, I think she... I think they refer to her name. They don't refer to her name in the first book. Is that not true?
No, I don't think so. She certainly never shows up, but I don't think anybody even names her. Like, I think we hear the Amyrlin once or twice, maybe. But I'm trying to remember if she even shows up in the Great Hunt, or if they are pulling her all the way from book 3, The Dragon Reborn.
No, I think you're right. I think it is the Great Hunt. It is when, when Moiraine, has this, like, coordinated meeting with her, and yeah, so that must have been in book 2.
Although certainly the stuff that we are learning about her and her background and all that, I think we vaguely knew her fishing background. And like you said, she always uses like all these like idioms that are fishing related or about gutting fish or something to do with her dad. But I don't think we saw any scenes of her younger until maybe all the way in New Spring, the prequel, which you haven't read yet. So it's just like we only see the older Amyrlin one, and they bring her into this episode in huge ways. Okay, so Keeley, you pointed out the surprising thing of her having so much skill in the power demonstrated already, and her dad even commenting on, oh wow, you're already like untying these knots and everything. He has an amputated left arm, and so he's struggling with the fishing hook setup and all that, and she helps him out with it. And we're learning that it's trouble because they live in Tyr, where channelers are extremely frowned upon, and it's going to get them into trouble if anybody finds out. But the fact that she's doing this delicate thing with the power so quickly, and multiple times last episode and in this episode, we have people referring to her as the most powerful Aes Sedai in the White Tower, and really emphasizing that ability, like her raw strength and maybe her skill as qualifications for being the Amyrlin seat. And I'm struggling throughout both these episodes to remember how much that is actually like a true thing in the books. Like how much that is like yes, Siuan is very powerful, but is that the thing that makes you the Amyrlin? Just being the best at magic qualifies you to lead the Aes Sedai, which they seem to be hinting at here.
Yeah, they with Siuan, I think they place her as like above average, but not the most powerful Aes Sedai from what I remember from reading throughout the rest of the series. I think they specifically talk throughout the books about how the more powerful usually are placed at a higher, even if they're younger, they're placed at a higher level in the books. But like I said, the Amyrlin seat title takes like precedence over that strength kind of scale,
which has so much to do with the tower politics and political standings that we get really into in this episode. So their house is burned down, right? And the dad, who is played by Peter DeJersey, and young Siuan, played by Kira Shansa, he sends her off to the White Tower where she can learn to control it and be safe from all the prejudices in Tyr, which sort of to me, like, we're getting more beautiful shots of the Czech Republic, I guess, these like mountain valleys and rivers, but the way that they have done the architecture we see in the background here and the style of their fishing village, and some of the buildings we see in the distance, which look to be CG buildings, maybe behind the mountains and stuff, the version of Tyr they're showing really reminds me of something South Asian, like maybe Southeast Asian, like Cambodian or Indonesian elements in here, even in their style of clothing and everything.
Yeah, there are in the. I actually thought it reminded me of there are karst peaks in like southern central China too that fit that same build that look very similar to what they showed in the Tyr village.
So we get these introductions to these characters here, this setting that we haven't seen in person yet. We get into our intro, which I realized I was mentioning to Keeley in the chat. We've never actually mentioned the intro to the show, like the intro theme song or what it shows in passing. And I guess I just wanted to say it's been growing on me as the season's gone on. I actually do watch it every time, and I like the abstracted thing they're doing with showing the pattern weaving out from the wheel here. I like the music, which is going more for this sort of haunting choral melody thing than necessarily a big bombastic fantasy theme going on. And then we get into the episode proper at the White Tower, and things are just wildly different from anything in the eye of the world at this point, what we're reading. Being brought before the... What do we want to talk about first here? There's so much to talk about in the White Tower in this episode, and in this scene, this scene in particular, in Moiraine and Siuan and Logain and Leandrin and Alana. It's a lot.
I think this for me was like the episode of quotes and one-liners, because I kept writing shit down as they were talking. I thought that it was Leandrin's such a pain in the ass. Like, I'm just so sick of her. She feels very high school drama to me. With like
very Malfoy.
Yeah, like trying to throw Moiraine under the bus and like acting like she's hot shit, and then later on, like Moiraine makes a comment to her that shuts her the hell up. But for like this whole scene with Logain, I thought it really hit the nail on the head how much their world is changing. The fact that he said, you know, people out in the world away from here used to like turn away from anyone that claimed to be the dragon, and now I have an army behind me ready to take you down. And the thing that like I really liked was when he said, you know, what they see is one man against 9 women, to show like how not powerful you guys are. It's kind of like, oh shit, like he's not wrong. That like his amount of power seemed to be ridiculous compared to theirs, because he did kill Karenni, so it was kind of like, okay, he's got a fucking point, but also he's a dick.
And he had basically killed them all even before. I forget, how did that even happen, that Karenni still wound up dead and Nynaeve didn't heal her? Did he kill her after Nynaeve did the healing of everybody else who was bleeding out or incapacitated? Or was it just that he immediately killed her versus all of them were still in a healable state at that point? I guess it doesn't really matter. But yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, they're really hammering on this thing that we have brought up a couple times, of where a lot of the Aes Sedai's power seems to have faded from the world, literally and politically, but then we have all these new people showing up who suddenly have powers that way outstrip anything they've seen in ages.
So I really, first of all, I wasn't a huge fan of the last episode, and you know I wasn't on the podcast when you guys talked about it, but I heard
I don't think any of us were.
So I was really nervous about this episode, and I really liked this episode. I thought there was some I mean, Caleb, you saw I was like just texting you like crazy during it, even knowing you hadn't been watching it yet, with all like the bombs that were dropped in this episode. But I thought the opening scene was really good because the way they did the hall, I liked. You know, I didn't really have a picture of exactly what the hall looked like in my head, just like a rough like congressional parliamentary sort of thing. So I liked the dramatic like marble and the colors that they brought in and everything. I thought that was really good. I also did like that that Logain, because I called out the Aes Sedai's lack of power and like sort of like you guys said, devolving place in the world, because even though I feel like in book 1 I didn't get a huge sense of that in book 1. To me, in book 1, the Aes Sedai were like very well respected, and like, you know, I had a pretty positive opinion of them, and I won't give any spoilers, but like as the books progress, your opinion on them evolves in a lot of different ways, and you realize that it's not just like one organization that has like this, everyone's the same. There's like a lot of, you know, like sex and different things going on. So I liked that he alluded to like themes that are definitely going to come out later in the books, in the scene where he starts, you know, decrying the fact that they're so weak at this point.
Yeah, that was something we brought about in the book talk this week, in the episode we recorded the other day, that we didn't even, like, an Eye of the World, there's barely even any mention of the Ajas until nearly the end of the book, and then you only get the red mention somewhat early on. And even where we are now, Moiraine just revealed that she's blue for the first time. So the idea of all these factional differences and their goals being so distinct, she's just so close to our only representation of Moiraine as she's out here trying to save the world. So she's the only Aes Sedai we really know until we meet Elaida, who definitely seems a lot more, if not quite sinister, a very different figure from Moiraine, with a very different set of priorities. But we don't get anything like this. This is real, like, yeah, getting into the nitty gritty of the tower and what holds them together and what tears them apart. At this point, Eric mentioned again that how handy it is, and how glad I am that they're just taking the route of simplifying by all the Aja wear only their color clothing at any given time, like uniforms. It does make it a lot easier to keep track than I feel like this otherwise would be. I'm totally fine with that visual change, even though almost none of them wear shawls, and even though they mention the shawls as being this is like the first time in this episode, right? I think it's the Amerlin mentions like earning your shawl or something, but it must be metaphorical here, symbolic.
I liked on that same note. I actually made a note on my phone last night while we were going through this for a few of the things, and one of them was that I did like the way they dress was cool, and I also like how in the book they focus a lot on how like the greens are like they have multiple warders and they're like, more promiscuous, and that they talk a lot about how their dresses are much more low cut than the others, which was very apparent in the scene with her and Leandrin, with Alana, Leandrin, and Moiraine, where Moiraine and Leandrin dress are so much more conservative and high neck.
Yeah, the fun and games Aja. It's very hard to see at various points why more people wouldn't flock to green than the other one. They seem to be having a much better time of things, in addition to being the battle Aja, I guess. But we do get to know Swan a little bit in her public face here. Now, this is one of those things where it's been so long since I read these books. I did have mixed feelings about the way that Swan is, the public face that she's giving here. So she's played by Sophie Okonedo, who we've seen in a lot of TV shows, I think, over the past decade, or at least she feels very familiar. And like just about everyone so far, I thought pretty well cast throughout this episode. I did find her dialogue here, though, where she starts being like, "You dare to challenge me," to Logain personally, and getting really into, I did not write down her exact words, so let's see if I can find the gist of it here to some extent. Oh yeah, she does it for Moiraine as well. And we see in the course of episode why this is a necessary show, why she needs to put on this front with Logain and with Moiraine. But by the same token, she is presenting this version of her ideals and the Aes Sedai centered on her strength, and coming back to, again, on her power and on the right of the Aes Sedai to just trammel over the world and to do whatever they please, and no one dare challenge them, as a might makes right ethos. That, to me, is not something I can ever think of Swan saying in the books, publicly or not. Like, I tend to think of her as a character who represents the very lofty ideals of the White Tower, and maybe I'm misremembering, even as she shows in The Great Hunt. But I would think of her as giving a much more idealistic, like, we serve the world type speech here. But that's not what she gives. She gives the world better get under our feet and deal with it or else. And that includes you, Logain, and that includes you, Moiraine, kind of speech here. I don't know. So I'd be curious, Keeley, what your reaction was to this, not ever having met her in any form at all. And then Nick, what your reaction was as somebody who is much more recently familiar with what she's actually like in the books than I am.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that whole, like, bow down to me, I'm fucking amazing. It just felt very over the top. And, like, I was taking notes at certain points, and then later on in the episode I was like, like, everything's making sense now. So, like, having no interaction with her, it felt shitty. Like, I don't know why I expected her to not be so arrogant, but it came across as very arrogant. And I guess, like, anytime that someone does have, like, a ridiculous amount of power, if they come across as, like, they know they do, that pisses me off. Like, I don't like that at all. Like, be a little bit humble, please. So I didn't really enjoy that part, but I think it made sense given the context of everything else that happened. But even knowing that, it still feels like, wouldn't they know that's fake? Unless she was like that all the time. Yeah,
and I keep coming back to, who was it a couple episodes? Which Sedai was pointing out to us that, Aes Sedai literally means servant of all, and that's supposed to be their guiding mentality, even though, and the irony being that they don't necessarily embody that at this point in the world, but some of them still try to. And maybe I'm clinging to this version of Swan who privately and publicly does really believe that her main role is as a public servant, essentially. What do you think, Nick?
I think she has to put on the mask of, like, the White Tower, and I think she's aware of how the White Tower views itself and how the Aes Sedai view themselves and, like, how they're positioned in the world. But I feel like because of her, this larger mission that she's on, alongside Moiraine, she still has to, she has to mask that somehow and present this, like, super strong front. So I think that's kind of how I took her arrogant attitude.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me with regard to Moiraine and with the, like really making a show of dressing her down. I guess it's more the Logain part that I'm reacting to in terms of the face presented to the world. But I do think they're really handling it well with what both of you mentioned, the reveal of her actual relationship with Moiraine and the fact that nobody can know that they are allies and more than allies in this case with each other here. But the things I think it was the part with Logain that to me just felt downright shitty in terms of the dressing down, and then but I really like the way that it's handled from the switch that is made with Logain seeming really spiteful and kind of sexist in his throwback, until we realize a moment later, as Swan realizes fully, that he's just trying to get them to kill him, to execute him, that he's just looking for the easier out of all this now that they have cut him off. And we transition right from that moment into the thing you mentioned, Keeley, the Leandrin throwing Moiraine under the bus after Moiraine and Alana just stood up for her and being called to task because Moiraine has been missing for like 20 years and nobody's known what she's up to, and she's not sharing her secrets or her information with everyone. So what the hell is she doing, and what is she supposed to be doing? And it's time to call for account, which is... It's interesting that they put all this here in light of what we talked about before, that they don't stop by Tar Valon in the novel, and there's none of this, none of the scene, none of the sequence, none of the sense of what we wondered of. Keeley, was it you who brought up, like, well, why doesn't Moiraine go back to the White Tower to confer with her sisters to heal Matt permanently? Yeah. Although we'll get to that. I was very surprised at the degree to which they seem to throw that plot line away in a significant way, and then maybe not at the end of the episode. So many twists here. This is just a twisty, turny episode of surprises from book things. And then we go from the White Tower and the showdown with Leandrin, and Moiraine's going to be held to account tomorrow, or she's going to receive the Amerlin's judgment tomorrow. And then we go to Moiraine meeting with Maigan next at that point, who is the head of the Blue here, who is not that character in the book at this point. She's not the head of the Blue at this point. Maigan is a character from much, much later in the series, with an initially much smaller role, who I think they're folding into whichever character actually was the head of the Blue Aja at this point in the story, which I don't know, maybe you remember, Nick, or maybe that's too many books ago now.
I don't know if they even mentioned it. I don't know if they mentioned the head of the Blue Aja even early on. Like, I feel like it must have occurred somewhere in mid-series. Yeah, a question for you guys, having read. So it's interesting because I thought they handled the whole Tar Valon. I knew something was off. I knew I didn't remember all these details, but I did feel like the general concept was there. The spirit of it was there. And like it sort of made sense to me as combining some of the plots from book 2, The Great Hunt, and with Eye of the World. But did Moiraine actually like threaten Leandrin in the book? Like, was she able to somehow like shoot her down? Because I don't recall that or not.
Leandrin is not in the Eye of the World. We have not met her at this point. I think she might be another Great Hunt character. The only other Aes Sedai that we see on screen, on page in the Eye of the World is Elida when Rand is at Morghase's court, and Moiraine doesn't meet her. In fact, in the chapters we just read, Moiraine is very deliberately avoiding all the other Aes Sedai because they're in Caemlyn when they reunite the whole party and then go into the Ways. And all the Aes Sedai in Caemlyn are red. There's like 20-something Red Aja who are there with Logain, who is not gentled yet, and they're taking him on the way to Tar Valon, setting up the Great Hunt event. So yeah, it's a very different dynamic, and both have a really interesting way of handling something we identified as being, I think, for Dan especially, a point of contention in these chapters we read of the everybody gets reunited, and then we just kind of get propelled into Moiraine realizing, oh God, the Eye of the World is in jeopardy. The Dark One is going to break out. We need to get to the Blight right now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the show kind of has to do the same thing in a different way, since we're in Tar Valon for this part, and finding what seems to be, I think, a pretty good excuse of getting her exiled by the end of the episode. Which I'm not sure is something that ever happens at all in the books. Is it? She
gets punished.
I'm getting so thrown.
Like, she gets punished or verbally admonished is what she gets. Moiraine from Swan. I think she dresses her down in front of other Aes Sedai, or at least she makes it seem that way. I think in the second book where like she gets but Yeah, I mean that scene just transitioned into her with Swan, and that was just like that's what I was texting you about. It was like blew my mind when she and Swan were having relations, and then there's some great one-liners there, and Swan says, get on your knees, and I just like gasped and was like was looking around the room, the empty room, and staring at no one and looking for a reaction because it was just such a great revelation. I actually think that that's a really interesting way to approach their relationship too, and it makes kind of more sense because there's always this kind of disconnect between Swan and Moiraine, where they were like friends as novices, and then they eventually
literally bunkmates, right? As novices,
yeah, then they just disconnect, and then kind of go their separate ways. But there's still a connection there. So I liked the way they handled it. I thought it was like a creative way to put them in a relationship, or put that relationship into like this sort of plot line.
Right, because you have also not read A New Spring yet, the prequel starring Moiraine and much, much more young Swan Sanche, right? You're like almost there. You're one book away.
Oh yeah, am I
that one or something?
Am I like unspoiling? Am I creating non-spoilers because I haven't read it? Because that's my from not having read the prequel yet. That was like my perception.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I think. It's probably fine since we're pointing out differences here, and since the show is going on its own continuity, and I don't want anybody to be disappointed as we're reading through these. There's no sexual or romantic relationship ever made explicit between Swan and Moiraine, but a large part of New Spring is concerned. It has to do with the fact that they are way, way, way closer than anybody else realizes, and that they have this sort of secret pact going on, that they are weaving this whole long-term plan together that we get hints of throughout this episode that requires them to pretend like, barely to even know each other in public, and certainly not to be friends. Which also gives meaning to something we were really tilting our heads about the other week with the portrait in episode 5 in Moiraine's bedroom, and what the meaning of that was, the strange painting that turns out to be a Terre Angreal. We are jumping through about half the episode, though, I'm realizing, because there is a lot of tension and build up to before that night where they actually meet together. Because there's so many threads here that Moiraine is like bustling around Tar Valon, tying up plot threads, addressing outstanding dangers, reuniting the party. She's like going from building to building, meeting the separated members of the party as they're brought together. She has that bath scene with Mygon where they catch up. And doesn't matter much long term because Mygon, once the head of the Blue here, is basically ordering her back to the tower. And Moiraine knows that she can't do that because she's on a secret mission that she can't tell Mygon about. So what's she going to do? That's a problem. She can't be stuck in the White Tower. She has to deal with her charges, one of whom is the Dragon Reborn. They go to, I guess one of Moiraine's little birds finally comes through, and she does know that Rand and Mat are in the city, which was something we were like last time, like, okay, Moiraine's got the spy network everywhere. How does she not seem to know anything that's going on here? Turns out she does. She was just late getting here, I guess, and she arrives. And we get a scene that all of us loved in the book of the addressing and healing of Mat from the dagger, sort of, and the moment where he lashes out and tries to kill Moiraine with the dagger. And we talked about they did the scene a little bit differently here, but we talked about like this perfect shot set up in the book where Mat goes right to her neck and she doesn't even flinch because she knows that Lan is like right there and grabs his arm at the last possible second here. We've got her dressing down Rand for hiding all of this, and she recognizes immediately that it's not channeling. That's the problem with Mat. We're ending that misdirection at this point. Mat is not a channeler as far as we know. So here we get the Shatter Logoth dagger. Thoughts on this scene coming into place here and all this finally happening?
Yeah, I really liked it. I liked the way that they changed it for the show with the whatever it's called coming out of Mat and then like trying to force itself down her throat to be like, take her over. I thought was so freaking gross and creepy. Visual. Yeah, it reminded me a lot of that scene that I'm like hella traumatized from in Little Nemo, the cartoon movie, where the king is like swallowed up by the giant like oil thing or whatever the hell it was. I thought that was great, and I also this was the first time that I really felt like this Rand matches the book Rand, because the book Rand is an idiot and we can't stand him, and he's like, he just reads very young, and this was the first time when Moiraine was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, he's gonna die because you're being a dumb shit. Like, thank you for pointing that out, because he clearly is struggling. And in the show, does Rand know that Matt has the dagger? Was that like made explicit, or is that just in the book that like he can see him reach for it every 2 seconds?
No, I don't think he knows it in the show. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually really, really sympathetic in this machine. And I think Moiraine is being an asshole, understandably. I mean, she doesn't know that Rand has very good... The show has given us very good reason to think, and given Rand very good reason to think, and had multiple, much wiser and more knowledgeable characters tell him, or specifically Tom tell him that, he can channel. You got to keep him away from the Aes Sedai. And we've seen what the Red are like in this one. And really, like, how much does Rand know Moiraine at this point, and whether she is going to immediately turn around and kill Matt as far as he is concerned? But so I don't know. I was a little more sympathetic to his position here. Like, what was he supposed to do, I guess, is the thing. Knowing what he knows in the show, or what he thinks he knows about Matt right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. But I also feel like this kind of plays into still like them discrediting Moiraine, that like he looks like shit. You think she's not going to notice that he looks like shit? Like, how much is not talking about it doing anything? So I get kind of both sides, but also, what the fuck, Rand? Like, Matt is clearly struggling, if nothing else. Like, this is not, he can visually not hide what's happening to him.
Yeah, he does look terrible, even before Mashadar black inky stuff gets pulled out of his throat and recontained in the dagger. Although, huge critical difference here that I think the show is just lying about again and misdirecting, where it's a very, very important thing we talked about extensively in the book, that she is not able to heal Matt. She is like able to temporarily contain Mashadar within him, but notes two things. One, she can't separate him from the dagger, and the dagger is going to reinfect him. And two, it's going to infect him and then the entire world probably, and wherever he goes. And this is a really big deal and an existential threat. Here, she says flat out, he's healed, he's fine, as long as he doesn't touch the dagger again. And then very cheekily, the show just refuses to let us see what happens to the dagger. Doesn't even show her like putting it away somewhere, I don't think, and doesn't show it on the camera again. I thought this was cheating a good bit in terms of misdirection and trying to make the audience think that this is resolved when it's clearly not going to be, I think. And it's for a jump surprise at the end of the episode. What did you all think about this?
There was that dagger really presents itself for a long time throughout the books. Like that thing makes its way through many different books and plot lines, and so it's interesting that they just decided to cut it off. I guess it sort of makes sense, because they can still accomplish all of the effects of the dagger that it has, and the scenarios that arise from the dagger, stabbing people and being owned by certain people, etc. They can still make those things happen without the dagger being involved. So I think maybe, I understand where it came from, but
that's the thing. I don't think it's going anywhere based on what happens at the end of the episode. I think they're just pretending that this is the end of it and that Matt is healed and all that.
Oh, so you think the dagger is going to rear its head again, that this isn't the end that we're seeing.
Well, to jump ahead 40 minutes in the episode, Matt stays behind and doesn't go with them into the ways in a very ominous and what the hell is going on with Matt way. And she does say this line, as long as he doesn't touch it again. Well, I'm like, so I don't know. To me, that reads as by the end of the episode, the dagger is probably still working on him in some way. That's what keeps him behind. And that's also what's going to allow them to transition out Barney Harris for Donald, his name, I forget the name of the replacement actor. But I don't.
We're jumping around, I know, but in the book I don't remember. In the book, Matt never ends up like in the Eye of the World area and stuff like that, right? Or he kind of.
Oh no, he goes with them.
He does. Okay,
he's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe not then.
Well, I don't know, like, was it, I forget who it was, maybe it was Dan, that was saying that they thought, like, maybe they would make Matt so kind of fucked up that they could transition to the new actor and be just, like, play it off as, like, oh, his voice changed because of the dagger. But I think the only thing that they show is that, like, the bad shit gets put back in the dagger and it hits the ground, and then, like, Lan comes out of nowhere and, like, throws a pillowcase over it. It's like, that's kind of the end, like, we don't see it again, so we never actually see if Lan has it, or if Moiraine has it, or if Matt was able to, like, get it back or whatever, because she says, like, you know, he's fine as long as it doesn't go near it again, because he's still, there's so much, like, darkness in him that it'll just be drawn to it. So it's very, like, you know, just whatever you do, keep Boromir away from the ring, because it'll fuck him up. So, yeah, I kind of felt that way too, that, like, as soon as it closed, as soon as they kept him out, I was like, is this the end of Barney Harris? I was, like, so sad of it, because he does such a great job. But yeah, I agree with you that I think that they're setting us up to think that things are fine, and clearly they're not.
Well, and it's what you mentioned with the pillow thing too. That's specifically what feels like the cheat to me, in that from a film language perspective, we know there is nothing more important in this scene besides the people than the dagger. That is made clear. That is Moraine's focus. That is the camera's focus. That is the dialogue's focus. And she points out the inherent danger of this. You cannot do that, I think, from a filmmaking perspective, and then not show the camera lingering on the dagger at the end of the scene, or showing us what happens to it, because that is the foremost thing on every one of these characters' minds and on the camera's mind, and in our perspective here. That's the part that felt to me like a brazen, there is a shot missing from this. You have to show the dagger lying on the ground, which that wouldn't make sense. No, they're not going to leave it there, right? So you have to show who picks the dagger up, who carefully slides it into their cloak, whether that's Lan or holding it for Moiraine, or Moiraine, like, lifting up with air and wrapping it in something. That is missing. That feels like a cheat. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but that was one of those filmmaking moments that I'm like, you can't do that. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
You're cheating the perspective of the scene here, and pretending the audience isn't going to notice.
Well, and that just plays into, like, if it happens off camera, it didn't happen. So the whole thing, we talked about how many times with Tom that, like, he died off camera, that he didn't fucking die. Like, so something happened with the dagger off camera, dagger's still here. Like, we'll find out later, Tom will show up with the dagger.
That led us into, like, that you know, the next scenes they heal Perrin as well, right? Which was they, like, talk about healing Perrin and what his, like, wolfy characters are characteristics are coming from a little bit. But it also brings in alongside, actually, I felt like the dagger in my mind was a lot more glorious than the sort of, like, pocket knife that it ended up being in the episode. But my bigger disappointment with misrepresentations are Loyal just popping up again, and you guys talked about this in your last episode, but just continue to be vastly disappointed every time Loyal comes on screen. I just, like, shake my head, and I'm like, God, how did they do this?
Yeah.
I at some point I'm hoping maybe I'll just get used to it and just accept that's how it's got to be. Maybe they'll change things in season 2. I don't know. But we do get the scene with Perrin and Egwene. This was something I mentioned off air to you, Keeley, that I found confusing, and it didn't seem to go anywhere. Is that Moiraine? She can't lie, but she deceives Egwene into thinking that she doesn't know where Rand and Matt are at this point, which seemed like a real dick move to me and unnecessary given in the course of the episode. I wasn't really sure what her game is here. I think you suggested maybe she's just trying to make sure she knows everything that's going on before and that everybody's okay before letting everybody reunite here. Though I did feel the contradiction in Moiraine just has this dressing down of Rand for, why wouldn't you go seeking out help about this? And then she comes and finds out what is going on with Perrin, and she's like, you must not tell anyone about this. Don't like, keep this a sworn secret. If any other Aes Sedai find out, Perrin is probably fucked. Make sure that this is just between you and me. So it's like, well, when you're not here, Moiraine, how is anybody supposed to know what the right way is to handle things or what they're supposed to be doing? But I did like the scene and the reveal of her understanding of what's going on with Perrin, which I felt like similar to her reaction in the book. And they are again muddying the waters, and in terms of now it's time for us to, now that we're done suggesting that Matt could be the Dragon Reborn, even though he still might kind of be, now it's time to suggest that Perrin could be the Dragon Reborn, and that we don't know what form his power is going, that the Dragon Reborn's power is going to take. It could take presumably even the form of being a wolf brother, she's suggesting here. And then the point where I was just like, what? Excuse me? Was when she suggests that, is it this scene that she suggests the Dragon Reborn soul could be split into all 5 of them, and that it might all 5 be the Dragon Reborn? And that was the moment where I was like, okay, show. If you are just doing all this to try to confuse book readers and misdirect people who've never seen or read any of this before, this feels like a bit much to me. It feels like over the top. I feel like we have enough with the possibility that it's any one of them, unless that is going to be the huge change of what it's leading up to, that all 5 are the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just like, I know I'm getting so hung up on lore stuff and book differences here in a way, but this episode was just so much twisting and turning in that sense that I didn't know what to think.
That whole thing kind of felt to me like, oh, okay, those are like the kids are just the Horcruxes. Like he just split his fucking powers so that it's across, how many people. But one thing I forgot to mention is that Master Gil is in the show, like because he's the guy that tells Moiraine and Lan that that's the room. Because I saw the name pop up and I was like, hold on, what does that say? Because we were bummed that Master Gil plays such a big role in the books and not in the show. So he is in the show for like 2 seconds and then, no dialogue. This was the first time that I like really, really loved Egwene because Moiraine comes in and she's like, oh, we can fucking heal his back. He won't even have scars. You'll never know. And then Egwene's like, yeah, emotional scars, you dumb bitch. And I was like, thank you. Like, Perrin is so fucked up. Fucked up. And they just keep adding more and more trauma to him. And so I was happy that Egwene was like being protective of him and that she also picked up on the wolf thing because how many times is Rand like, oh, his eyes, or at least in the book, he's like, he looks so fucking familiar. And Egwene's like, it's a fucking wolf. So I know they're like 2 different experiences. She actually got to see the wolves, but in the show, but like, I just appreciate how protective Egwene is of Perrin because he just feels like a little baby bird right now, just ready to get squashed.
I felt like
knocked out of the nest 4 times.
The soul splitting dragon kind of theme reveal to me was like, I think part of a lot of the show I'm really enjoying and can get behind, but part of it feels like they do have these situations where it sort of just feels like they're trying to solve a problem and not thinking about like, how do we like holistically bring this theme through? Like they're kind of just like, oh, well, we'll keep the suspense really high by saying it could be multiple people. And then like, that's kind of their way of like misdirecting who it could be still, rather than, let's keep pushing the characters one way or another, or introducing different parts of their powers, so to speak, to the show. So to me, I wasn't a big fan of that, and it feels like it occurs in more than one example too.
There's much we don't know of the Dragon Reborn, according to Moiraine in this scene. So we'll see if that's true. And it ends with her technically telling the truth to Egwene, like I mentioned, that, I have lots of people watching to see when they come to the city, and I have it on good authority they're okay. But Egwene's like, but you'll tell me if as soon as you find them. And I forget what Moiraine says to not technically lie about it. Before going to the scene of where we find out that she's combing her hair out in her chambers, and Lan comes in wondering why Moiraine has suppressed their bond, which is, I think, maybe the first mention we've had of this. I don't think that's another thing I don't think we find out in Eye of the World is that Aes Sedai can suppress the bond with their warders so that they can't sense each other, can't feel each other for a time. And she justifies it to him pretty convincingly about, I've actually forgotten now about the things that they both have to do, and the fact that she's sending him off to guard the Two Rivers folk instead of her, because that needs to be his highest priority. And he's not happy about that, but he's going to do it so that she can approach this painting, this inside the metal frame, and turns out to be a Tir-Angrial. I have lots of questions about this Tir-Angrial and about the meaning of where we go in the scene and what happens with it in light of many other events of the later books that we can't talk about. So maybe Keeley, what is your impression of what happens in the scene here? From your perspective, what is this story?
Yeah, so I was like writing down notes almost every single scene. And so I wrote down Moiraine master bond with Lan, looks at the painting at the window a lot. Is the window a portal? Would anyone know that she's using the power? Okay, she fast traveled. They're working together? they were lovers. Like, just kind of like getting more and more hype the whole time. I have a question though. So, the Aes Sedai are allowed to use the power, but they can't use it as just like a weapon just because they fucking want to. But each time that they use it, does it do anything? Like, is there like a finite amount of times that they can access the power, or is it kind of like whenever you want to, for whatever you want to, as long as you're not going crazy or working with the Dark One?
It's like, Caleb, I'll jump in. I think it is infinite, but there are points. I mean, even you saw it in the Leandrin scene with Logain, where she says like you might burn out if you pull more of the power in. So I think the idea is like there's not a limited amount of like power you can use in the universe that's being slowly drained from. It's more just how much your person and body can handle.
Yeah, and it's exhausting to keep doing it. We see, I think, very early on the biggest inclination we get of that is how Moiraine gets tired after all the healings and the rejuvenating everybody else to keep them going on the road. And granted, the dagger is something different, but she looks like she might fall over after withdrawing Mashadar from Matt, putting it back into the dagger there. And I think that's maybe a combination of the fight with Mashadar, but also that it is physically draining. But yeah, like you said, Nick, I think the only cap is your own personal stamina and capacity. And different people have different capacities to safely hold amounts of the one power. And the only example we've gotten of what happens from pulling too much so far is the story of Manetheren and the last queen of Manetheren. When her husband, the king, dies on the battlefield, she draws in enough of the one power to blow herself up in a nuclear flame, essentially, that wipes out the entire Trolloc armies and the old kingdom of Manetheren. And we kind of see the scene you mentioned with Leandra and Nick, where they're visualizing it by her face almost starting to crack apart with light coming through pores, looking like she might literally explode if she takes any more at that scene trying to fight Logain. So I think they're setting us up for that to happen eventually. Although that is very... I
was just wondering, so like the different, I said however many colors there are, because I feel like every time I learn all the colors, then they show wearing additional fucking colors. But so I was wondering, like, okay, so it made Moiraine really exhausted to kind of heal everyone or like take their fatigue away. And then I noticed she doesn't heal Perrin's back. She's the yellow will. So I was wondering, like, so the yellow then potentially wouldn't get drained from healing someone the way that a blue would. The blue wouldn't necessarily get drained making portals to be like spies compared to like another color, because she has been using the power a fucking lot lately. And it seems like even, the end when she opens the way gate, she breathes a little heavy, but she's like, all right, let's fucking go. So I would just like, I guess I'm just having a hard time kind of tracking like how they use the power and in what ways they can or can't and what it does to them physically. It's just like, I don't know if that's just, supposed to be vague or if the show is kind of throwing it all over the place or what.
I think the show is not being specific. Like they're just sort of alluding to this general wariness that occurs after using some amount of the power. Because the books, the books really refer to like each person as having, like Caleb, you said, more or less capacity than another. So I do feel like the show is being a little bit elusive around it. And
they do. You mentioned the yellow Keeley. We get the one line last week about how when Leandrin and Moiraine have that spat about Nynaeve in the hall, where Leandrin seems to think that there's some chance of Nynaeve joining the red, which Moiraine is like, yeah, good luck with that. If anything, she's probably going to join the yellow because of that healing ability. And I don't think they're meaning to imply that, like the yellow can heal without consequence so much as different people are good at different things in the power. They have different skills with different kind of weaves. The only thing the book has told us about that is that Moiraine is especially gifted in air. It's kind of her signature element for air, and like why the way that she weaves it together for wind and for the whirlpool and for lightning and stuff, bringing in other elements like water and fire in those. But that different Aes Sedai will have different things that they are more skilled at, both in terms of the elements and in terms of their general combining healing abilities. Like healing is something that does take all the elements, I think. Is that right? All 5 elements of the one power, Nick? I mean, but this is stuff that they'll get into as more of our young channeler characters start to learn to channel and learn how the power works mechanically, which we don't see much of in this scene that we've sort of generally talked about with Moiraine and Swan here, of reuniting and being explicitly lovers, being really close, having this secret plan they're working towards, and they're meeting in whatever this Tir-Angrial space is. I don't think the show gives us any indication where they are, other than that it looks like Swan's burned down childhood home, which it clearly cannot be. And we know that Tyr is thousands of miles away. Whether they're in a pocket dimension in the White Tower or something else entirely, I think is left completely ambiguous. Because something that the books mention in the last chapters we read about when she finds out that the Two Rivers folks have been concealing these Balsamon dreams, which as we've mentioned have kind of fallen by the wayside in the show. They're like barely around anymore. That the threat seems to have de-escalated. When Moiraine finds out about that in the Eye of the World, she says, if you had told me that, I would have tried to dreamwalk or found someone who could dreamwalk, even though we haven't had dreamwalkers in like 1,000 years. And so immediately that's kind of what I'm thinking of in the scene. Is this a dream space of some sort? Is this some other sort of pocket dimension? But we don't really know. We get the very fun scene between the two of them, and the moment you mentioned, Nick, of their sort of like, role reversal here, with at least in this scene, Moiraine sort of playing the more dominant one, with the kneel before me, which is all in all just a.
I was gonna say,
yep.
such a great scene, just so much fun. I thought it was like great because in the parts of the books I'm reading, they talk about like the Atheon Meir sea folk wedding vows, which just not going to reveal any spoilers, but like they say, the person who's the more powerful one in public must be the one who's less powerful in private. And so I thought that was a cool I don't know, connection that I made with that, because clearly Moiraine is so in this relationship.
And I guess this is the scene where they talk about all the new dragon possibilities from before.
Yeah, I had a question though. So one of them says something about being stilled. Is that the same as being gentled, but like the female version?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got to have different gender terms for them because it's that kind of world.
So have they explained like when they would ever do that? Like, why would they take ability to access the power away from female?
Well, they hint here that if you are really disobedient to the Amerlin seat, that might be one possibility. It seems like it's on the table that if Moiraine had betrayed the interest of the White Tower enough, or if Liandrin had betrayed the interest of the White Tower enough by what she did, the trial was interesting because we know the Aes Sedai have the 3 vows, not to lie, not to use the one power as a weapon, except against Darkspawn, or in last defense of the Aes Sedai's life or the life of her warder, and finally not to use the one power to create a weapon that normal human beings could use to destroy one another. But we also learned that they have all these other rules and laws that they're supposed to adhere to, like in terms of the proper trial procedure for gentling and everything, and that's a very serious breach in and of itself. Though that part got a little strange to me because like every single person who was there was kind of in unanimous agreement of like, yeah, there was no other choice but to cut Logain off in this moment. Swan has the good retort in the trial that, and this comes back to the Servants of All Things. She's like, well, these rules are to protect the world, not to protect us. They are to assure people that we're not tyrannical, all-powerful monsters. So better for you to die than to break the trial procedures, I guess, and to gentle Logain without a trial. But also that seemed to be ignoring the turnaround fact that he's leading armies. He is washing across the land. He's a threat to kingdoms, not just to those Aes Sedai there at that point. And if they see him and if they believe he's a false dragon, then he's a much bigger threat to the world otherwise. So I don't know. That felt like a little bit of again, the Swan having to put on a face for public appearance rather than anything substantive about the rules being broken there. But otherwise, I don't know that we've learned why a woman would have to be stilled. One possibility I can think of, we have had only mentioned in passing in the show and several times in the book, that some people believe that there is a black Aja. And in fact, in the chapters we just read, Baalzamon claims that that he does have Aes Sedai working for him, so that their dark friend Aes Sedai, which we don't know how that's possible at this point, because how could you be bonded on the oath rod and have to swear the 3 oaths, which make it impossible to be a dark friend and also serve the Dark One at the same time? And that is like a mystery right now. I think we have no idea how those things can be resolved. So we move to the next day from the scene of revelations with Swan and Moiraine, which is, I think, like that's a pretty good way of getting us the relationship in early here, rather than not finding out about it till the prequel written 15 years after the Eye of the World. And we get the scene of a partial reunion here with Egwene and Nynaeve. I was actually losing track of who was reunited when throughout this episode at various points. But we get this wonderful moment of the two Rivers women standing against the Amyrlin in her chambers. I got to say, I wasn't a fan of Egwene having this line of, why is she called the Amyrlin seat when there is also the literal seat here? Why are they the same thing? Like she's never heard of the concept of metonymy at any point, or like never even heard of the Amyrlin seat. It's like, it feels like a child asking, how can the White House issue a press release? The White House is just a building. Or like, how can the Vatican say something when the Vatican's not a person? Which I don't know. It seemed, I felt like they were not giving the audience enough of the benefit of the doubt there with Egwene. But I love this, the different characterizations here as they're all reacting in different ways, and Moiraine kind of quietly smiling at Nynaeve, just having none of Swan's condescension, or just whereas Egwene is kind of cowed by it a little bit, not sure how to react, not sure whether to bow curtsy. Lots of fun little dynamics going on throughout this moment.
Yeah, I was watching Maureen's face anytime they had her on camera, because she's just in the back like, oh shit, she's giving it to you. I liked how they made it so obvious that the two girls are different, though, because it starts, or at least in the book, like Egwene is not initially going to go with them when Maureen's like, we gotta fucking leave. She comes up a little bit later with Tom, right? Like where they're like, we're fucking coming with you guys if you're leaving the two rivers. And then it ends up being this whole thing where Egwene is like really excited to leave the two rivers, and to, she's excited to learn that she has access to power, and she's always been kind of like the, just so excited about everything new. So I like that kind of felt that way in this scene where she was like, what do I have to fucking do? Like, let's go.
Yeah.
Whereas Nynaeve is kind of like, what the fuck you want? Like, why am I here? I hate everyone. So as annoying as that is for Nynaeve to still be doing that, I did appreciate that it made it so obvious just where their head is at.
So I accidentally skipped over, leading to this scene. We have a moment in the hallway with Liandrin before they all get into the chambers here, where Moiraine and Lan are walking through. And you referenced something that happened here, Keeley. I have to get off my chest, though. For being renowned for her discretion and secrecy throughout the entire series, Moiraine has zero discretion in the course of this episode. She is loudly discussing Matt and their mission and riding away from the towers with Lan down the hallways like they're Aaron Sorkin characters wandering around the White House, just having this conversation to the wind, where Liandrin of all people can overhear them talking. He's like, Matt, do you? All these Two Rivers folk, do you? Interesting, very interesting, and all these things. And then even at the end of the scene, it's a great line where Moiraine gets this whole, and the Amyrlin bows to only one woman or whatever. And she says it loudly enough that I'm like, Moiraine, this is a very secret relationship as established throughout here. And you're just like throwing zingers to the wind where anybody might like, what does she mean by that? I'm torn between liking the lines and liking the scene with Liandrin and just being like aghast at Moiraine saying all these things aloud in public.
I couldn't believe the what she only bows to one woman comment, because I was like, wait, are they really slipping that in there? Like, there's no way. There has to be a woman. So I started going through in my head through all the female characters I could think of that she could possibly like actually kowtow to. And I was like, wait, there's no way they would just make that, comment without acting it. But I think you're right.
Yeah, I really liked, it does feel out of character for Moiraine to like get in Leandrin's face like that, but I did kind of like that it like took her down a notch. It's like, haha, fuck you, you're not perfect, you fake man hating bitch. Like I really liked that because she was trying.
It leads up to that.
Yeah, she was trying to be like, oh, I know who your fucking people are. It's like, just fuck off. But I have to say, like, living and working in the DC area and taking public transit, living and working in Philly, taking public transit, you would be fucking shocked at the shit that people talk about in public, that they just assume because I'm surrounded by people, no one's listening. I listen to everything people say in public, and people talk about shit they should not talk about. So I wasn't entirely like, oh my god, like she fucked up by talking loud. And it's like, okay, obviously it makes sense not to do that. Like if you've got massive secrets about, what could potentially go against the one known bad guy in the world, maybe don't fucking talk about it, if you're not in your room.
Yeah.
But it also
secret's so big, she has to accept exile not to disclose them, even though that's kind of part of the plan. But yeah.
But that also just kind of felt like I'm so used to seeing that type of scene of like people quickly, aggressively walking down a hallway together, talking about anything and everything. So it made sense. And then, I didn't really question it about like, why is she being so fucking brazen with everything?
What occurred to me too last night while I was watching it is like there's probably like every other page in the entire book series they talk about the serene like faces that the Aes Sedai are able to maintain despite all like stressors and crazy situations. And it was like occurring to me while I was watching last night. I was like, yeah, that really doesn't play well on TV, does it? So they've just completely left that out of the series.
I feel like there's also a fun element with that where it's like maybe that is the impression that the Aes Sedai give out in public, and that's how they, that's Moiraine when she first walks into the inn after waiting out in the rain for her dramatic entrance outside the Twin Dragons. It's kind of like, the same way the Jedi have all this stuff about, we don't have emotions, we don't have passions, we don't allow ourselves to get into any of these petty things, and then like switch to the Jedi Council. Let's see the ways in which people are expressing their passions broadly today and completely ignoring all their ideals on a daily basis, like as the public face versus the private one.
Yeah, that just never plays out. Well, because like even, The Witcher, people gave Henry Cavill so much shit because he was so emotive in the show. And then, I mean, how much shit did we give Daniel Henney for Lan so far? Be like, he's supposed to be like this like really stoic, and he's got, I mean, not Daniel Henney himself, he's playing the character wonderfully, but like they gave him so many lines and he's got so much emotion, and it's like,
which I think we've been enjoying for the most part, right?
Yeah, like we want these characters to be kind of that stoic because it makes them more mysterious and like, oh, how powerful are they? We can't tell. And then if they do it, we're like, what the fuck is wrong? Like, smile or something, be human. And so I feel like there's no perfect way to do it. We're always going to nitpick on it regardless of what it's supposed to be. But it is kind of weird to see people break character even a little bit. Like with the Moiraine, like she feels very stoic and then comes out of these, out of nowhere with these one-liners, and it's like, who are you? Are you the comedic relief of this fucking episode, or are you not?
It is cool to see her. I feel like she is being pushed to her limits in a lot of ways in this episode, and these a lot of big emotional scenes that for me work way better than what we were frustrated with the final scene of the last episode, with the long funeral sequence and the Lan's the chest thumping and the Lan screaming in grief for ages, and Moiraine tearing up there. That just went on so long and seemed so hard to connect to because we weren't sure what the show wanted us to make of all that, other than just show like, being a long scene of really raw grief expressed publicly. Whereas I thought this scene of Moraine's exile worked a lot better in that regard of when she has to publicly accept her punishment per plan. She's the one who tells Swan in private that you need to banish me. Like, I need to get out of the White Tower. The Blues are going to keep me here. We've got to go take care of the Eye of the World, for even maybe less clear reasons here than in the novel. Actually, they swapped this around. This is a pretty big change. In the Eye of the World, learning about the dreams is the final piece of the puzzle for Moiraine to realize, oh my God, the Dark One is so strong now and so close. He is about to break free. He's about to be able to reach out of his prison and touch the Eye of the World. And if he does that, he will be able to draw enough power to break the seals and be free. And that'll be the end of this story at that point. In the show, it's the opposite. The Dark One, Moiraine reveals here, is at his weakest he has ever been. And this is their one chance to go preemptive strike him. If we go grab the Eye of the World and use it against him while he's this is the time. We need to rush. We need to get the dragon there. So that's why she needs to be banished here. And it's interesting that they use the oath rod in this scene. I think it's probably one of those cases where they would never do this in the books, but this is a very cool visual way of representing the severity. Because, you know, in practical terms, all she has to do to not be able to return to the White Tower is to swear this anyway, because she already can't lie. She doesn't actually, and I guess this is a thing about the 3 oaths, you only really need the one oath on the oath rod, the oath not to lie, because then anything you swear after that, you're bound to. She could just promise I will never of my own will return to the White Tower until Swan Sanche orders me back. But I love the visuals of this moment, and we get to see the oath rod in action here, which we wouldn't otherwise get to, and have that visualized as the oath passes from Swan to Moiraine. And again, not particularly discreet in all the private things that Moiraine is saying aloud here, but it works for the emotional tenor of the scene, which was very raw and very and something we haven't seen from Moiraine up till this point, the degree to which this is costing her so much personally. And we get to see who she is as a person so much more than an Eye of the World, where she is the mysterious, more the mysterious wizard who whisk in and out of the story and at various points.
But to me, that's honestly, this is the most fun parts of the episode are just between Moiraine and Swan. When, get on your knees, and then the one-liner joke about how she bows to one woman, and then this scene where she's like whispering her like wishes to Swan in front of all these women who can channel and who frequently eavesdrop on everyone. Even though it
hear things
didn't
with the power.
make sense, it was still the most fun.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. Like, these are supposed to be some of the most like powerful, paying attention people, and I was like, did no one see their fingers gently touch? Like, did no one? So she's saying all of the like nicknames or titles that Swan has. And I was like, are they
like
hearing
pet
her?
names?
Do they think that she's just like sitting there silently for like a minute, taking this all in, or is like, do they hear gentle whispering? Like, what is
she's
going
on?
on?
She's not even whispering it. She's
saying
it like
saying
clearly.
It out loud. So that's why I was kind of like, they're choosing to ignore this. Like, so this is so fucking obvious.
But the end result is that Moiraine is going to have to leave the tower, so this is good impetus to get us out of here. We've seen her make plans with Loyal at this point, though I think somebody who hadn't read the book would have no idea what she's making plans with him about for the Waygates. And this episode does surprisingly little to explain what the hell the gates are, where they're from, what they're going to do. Presumably all that is being shunted to episode 7, the second of the penultimate episode of this season. Loyal here does not seem even fractionally as terrified or against this plan as he is in Eye of the World, which, the Eye of the World does to establish how dangerous the ways are and how bad an idea this is, that they're going to take the shortcut to Faldara. But the last couple, I don't want to skim past. Continuing that emotional arc of how big a sacrifice this is for Moiraine, as she's leaving the tower and all the other sisters are having to turn their backs on her, like really giving this finality, and just you're seeing the sisterhood that she feels with the ones who aren't her enemies here, with Alana's face as she passes by, and I keep correcting myself, maybe incorrect. It is Alana, right? The green, that is
Alana.
Been a major. Okay. Yeah. We get reactions from Maigan, played by Sandy McDade, the head of the Blue, at losing her most important agent in the tower from her perspective here, and she's really distraught about all this. I feel like they're setting up Maigan to be a pretty substantial role in season 2, maybe, possibly. The amount of screen time she gets in this episode, that was my inclination.
Yeah, and the fact that she says like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave because ships are disappearing and I need to go figure out what that's about." Is that in the book?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember them saying that in the book, that's like a sign that something's happening.
Another Great Hunt thing, I think.
Okay. So then, yeah, that kind of makes sense to me that they would drag her away, because it's clear that, like, they pick and choose which characters are going to be in the show, because how many characters, how many fucking small towns did they just completely get rid of?
Elias, where's our little brother?
So it feels like it would be kind of out of character for the show to introduce someone, establish who they are, and then just have it be, one episode and nothing else. So I agree with you that
unless
I
they're
feel
stepping.
okay, fair. But I kind of feel like I did see some people online online arguing that it wasn't about Steppen. It was a more like a bigger dialogue about the universe. I was like, whatever. I was focusing on Steppen, but I just feel like the actor that plays Megan is also really cool, and so I wish that they would continue her.
It felt to me like I don't know why. I can't give you a good reason, but it felt to me like Megan was one of those characters where they're just introducing surface level, then she's gonna like die. Like I got the feeling she was like gonna just I don't know die in some episode, and then Moiraine would be raised to like be the blue, or some other important character would. Like it just felt sort of like flat. Like she had, not that she wasn't acting well, but more just like her lines were like very transactional. Like there was a purpose to all of them, and it just felt like but she was an important enough character that you would notice her. And so to me, it felt like something was telling me someone's gonna kill this woman or something like that.
Oh yeah, I could see that being the case. And since she is somebody who is kind of in a nebulous zone of being a combination of multiple book characters, it feels like we really can't know for sure.
Yeah, like maybe I don't know, maybe the Black Aja or something get in, and she's like their first victim or something like that. But then, yeah, like you said, that led to the Waygate scene, which I was a little disappointed that they didn't, because in the book they go through like the city of Camelin, right, and they like find this basement Waygate, which I actually thought could have presented a lot of fun like plot scenes they could have set up in the future episodes too, with the Waygates versus having them out in the field in this like big open area. Because I felt like it could have introduced a lot of fun scenes of like creeping around, trying to learn more about the city and get a lot more of the settings that they wanted to get in there, rather than having it kind of right out in the field.
And they've changed the whole design of the gate, rather than being this stone carved thing that has like all these intricate designs, and you have to know which of the stones to remove and put in the sort of puzzle thing that then opens as like the stone itself opening wide and giving a passage. Here it's kind of, it almost looks like these two prongs, like stone prongs coming up out of the ground with empty space between them. I don't know why visually, I assume they just thought that this would be this worked better, more striking on set, maybe or maybe just easier. I don't know, than doing all the intricate stonework designs. The thing that is strange about it from a narrative perspective and a world building perspective is Moiraine demonstrates that you need to use the one power to open the Waygate in the show, which is very, very odd from what we just read in the books, because we know in Eye of the World the Waygates were built for the Ogier, and they are the Ogier's Waygates. The Ogier famously who cannot use the power and live in places where you can't touch the power, and the gates were right outside the settings, and they're the only ones who can navigate them. So why? And it seems like that's still true. They need Loyal to help them navigate the ways, because only Ogier can navigate the ways, the signs in there, and the language and the written song, I guess, for how you're supposed to find your way through these twisting passages. But the fact that you need the power to use them makes it seem like, well, what good were these ever to the Ogier, or what is their connection to it? I don't know. Maybe they'll have a justification for that next time. As to why they can't...
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, as to why they can't take the horses through the Waygate in this version, I assume that is entirely justified by budgetary problems and the difficulties of getting horses on a green screen in shots, or wrangling them indoors. That's my guess for why, because Moiraine has a line about horses cannot survive the ways, or something like that. So we got to leave them here, which is funny, having just read the chapters where it's the horses who save them getting out of there through and past the Trollocs in time.
I kind of don't like at all how they're doing the Waygates in the show, because there's so much like mystery about the Waygates and the ways in the book. Where like only really Moiraine and Loyal know what they are, or have any knowledge that they exist. And now the way that they're doing it here, it's like, so does everyone just accept that there's this big fucking statue in the middle of the field? Like, do they know what that is and assume no one can use it anymore, that it's like a sign of the past? How does Moiraine know that all you have to do is go up and fucking open it like a portal and it's totally fine? Like, there's just so many parts to it that I'm like, I hate that it's just like a big fucking statue in the field. And then in the in the book, they they know that they're being followed by Trollocs and shit, or that like Trollocs are in, because there's like scratches on the way gates because they're like stone things. These are fucking massive. How are they going to do that in, how are they going to show that there's something on them in the ways, unless they're just going to insert like these more giant fucking pillars with like a handprint scratch or something. Like it doesn't fit what I built in my brain, and it's pissing me off.
Well, do we really get to see much of inside? I thought we only get like the tiniest glimpse of a dark space inside the Wiggets. Did I miss like seeing what the corridors
they showed
look
the
like?
inside, which I thought was pretty cool. I did think it was kind of accurate. In my head, it was more like in that scene in the Squid Games where they had like all those stairs going up everywhere, except like black version of that. Yeah. That's what I was picturing in my head.
Escher architecture.
Yeah,
talking about.
But
last episode,
I think it was cool, the part they did show. But I think what we need to remember is that we should not be surprised at how disappointed we are with it, because it relates to the loyal character. So if the ways are related to loyal and loyal is disappointing, that's probably the most reason why.
I assume they're going to be we'll probably get the history of the ways in the ways, right? Because they have a long walk now to do, and they'll be talking a lot about what these places are as we're going through them next episode. Not including Matt, as we mentioned before, because the party is reunited here. We have kind of for me, I didn't fully enjoy the scene as much as I might have if I weren't mentally being like, oh wait, which characters met already through the course of this episode? So Egwene and Moiraine are reunited, obviously, but then Egwene and Nynaeve got to meet in the tower. But oh right, she hasn't seen Rand since then, so we have to. And then I was trying to remember logistically as we go around the circle, matching everybody up for hugs, and they don't really get to say much to each other. They get like one line each just to remind us of the connections. But I'm hoping we'll get some really good scenes with all of them reconnecting in the ways. Moraine's even like, there'll be time to tell your stories on the journey. It's a long journey ahead of us. Except that Matt won't be coming on said journey because they get in walking very, very slowly. But I guess they get far enough in that the way has to close for some reason. I don't know if it's got like a time limit, like a Stargate. It sort of feels like a Stargate, like Dan was pointing out. But Rand turns around, realizes Matt is just standing there staring at them ominously. And suddenly that brings context to the camera's been cutting to him a lot throughout the scene, which I did not really think anything of until that moment, because I thought it was just, this is the first time Matt has been himself, as far as we know, in a good while. But it turns out it's something else going on here. Trying to see if I can get to that one shot skimming back through the episode. We come into the opening here. There's tumbled pillars. Eric, watching along with me, immediately says, oh, it's the mines of, what's it called? Moria, as they enter the space, identifying the parallel here. Yeah, okay, so Matt's kind of hanging back behind. He looks sad. He looks down. Matt, what are you doing? They're asking, come on, the gate's closing. And he's just kind of standing there holding his cloak. I'm looking for it, but I'm pretty sure we don't see the dagger, though I presume that he has it. He looks really uncertain. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it in this particular moment. And then we get a brief lightning flash of the stones inside the ways there, and cut to credits.
Yeah, looking back at it now, because Matt is the only one that says like, oh, can we change our minds or something like that when they're standing outside. And in that scene, I was kind of like, oh, like it's just Matt, shooting the shit, making jokes, being Matt. And then afterwards I was like, oh, is that supposed to be like an indication that he actually still is kind of fucked up in some way and does not want to go in the ways? I don't know what that would mean about why he wouldn't want to go, because they know they're heading towards the Dark One. So I don't really know what they're going to end up doing with Matt.
Well, yeah, and there's a very strange inversion there in what she tells them that they're doing, which is that for reasons unclear to me, she is convinced, and I guess Swan was convinced, that they have to bring all 5 of them because they don't know which one is the dragon. So it's like sort of a Schrodinger's dragon box situation here. But they're convinced that all the others are going to die from being along there, and that only the dragon will survive. When I feel like the vibe I'm getting reading through these last set of chapters is, again, the opposite in the book, where it's that whoever is the dragon is probably going to die fighting the Dark One, and the rest will be okay. And they're along because they're all friends and moral support, and because they don't know which one of them is the dragon. So it's that was a little head tilting for me as she tells them that, or doesn't really fully tell them that, they're on what she thinks is a death mission for 4 of them. And she says that explicitly with Swan, or Swan says it, but she sort of hides it from the Two Rivers folks and just says, well, I can't know for certain. But she also tells them, to your thing, Keeley, about Matt maybe asking if they can back out. Moiraine has a line at some point in this conversation about, from here on out, we have no choice in anything. Nothing we do is our decision. It's all set. It's all the wheel from here, which was, I don't know what to make of that. That was a very, especially in light of Matt staying behind. I have no idea what she means by that in terms of them. There are no decisions left, I think she says, or something to that effect. I wish I had written down the exact line. It's all autopilot from here on out.
Yeah, that felt very like when they showed that Matt wasn't moving, and then they like panned back to all of them standing there watching, and I expected someone to fucking move, to like try to do something about it. So now I feel like they're gonna write it off as one of these another annoying fucking Moiraine things of like, well, the wheel wills what the wheel fuck whatever. It's just like, come on, man. Like, I wanted some kind of movement. Like, you just put so much effort into his dumbass to save him from the fucking dagger, and then now you're just okay with him staying behind?
I had that at the wheel weaves quote as one of my last notes from last night, because, like, I felt like it was super corny, just like the way they did it, and at the very end, she's like, the wheel weaves. And I'm like, because I feel like in the book, it's more of like a passing expression that they use when when they don't know what to, how to explain something. And I was expecting them to bring it, because it's a fun theme to like follow. So I was honestly, as like one of my most minor complaints, expecting them more to use that fun expression throughout the episodes, like peppered in here and there, rather than as like a closing, I don't know, that felt kind of corny thing.
Yeah, it's like her mantra whenever Lan is like, this is crazy, we can't do this, these kids can't, et cetera, then, they can't come along, what are you talking about? And then Moiraine will be like, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills, Lan, this is part of the pattern now, it's part of the pattern. But they had to get that in, I guess, for the trailer line there. Oh, she is wearing her shawl again in the scene. I was wrong. It does come back into the show here. None of them were in the White Tower, but Moiraine has her blue shawl in this moment as she is dramatically standing, parting the way. I do like the little beat of Nynaeve being like, none of us are going to follow you blindly. At this point, you need to tell us everything that's going on and lay out the stakes for us now. And Nynaeve continuing to be that voice of, you got to give some to get some. You can't always be like, we all need to tell you all our things, but you don't give us a hint of what the bigger picture is here on that. Though she still winds up holding back from them what she thinks, which is that 4/5 of them are going to be dead at some point in the next 2
Yeah, it sort of
episodes.
felt like that 4 out of the 5 of them are going to die thing sort of felt like a compromise between what you said, which was like, only the dragon dies, and then the rest of the books where it's sort of like, the dragon kills everyone around him that he loves. It's like this sort of compromise where she's like, well, actually, 4 of you will die and the dragon will live.
Because one component we don't have in the show, not having Elida, is we haven't had Rand's moment of prophecy of being surrounded by death and dying and chaos around him. And wherever he goes, people are going to die all around him. Or actually any of the specific Ta'Veren moments for any of them other than Loyal passing and saying it. Because we also don't have Min. Of all the characters we have not had introduced this season, there's no Min. And she's like our main source of important prophecies related to each of them and related to the stuff she sees around Matt, which seems like it'd be really relevant here in this moment, the things that she saw about him early on. Which, to be fair, Jordan in the book, we've talked about this as one of those things where he threw so many things early on in the story that have not been reminded to us in the audience or reinforced throughout the course of this enormous novel. And Min's visions are maybe one of those things that are ultra relevant to these last few chapters or last couple of episodes, and they have not come up again much in the book since then. And in the show, not at all. We've had no visions surrounding each of these characters, and the dreams have kind of gone by the wayside. I assume they'll be back next episode. Somebody pointed out on our last discussion another thing, that as a result of the dreams being minimized so much, Ba'alzamon is barely a character in the season, and he's just like some lingering background threat, right? You occasionally see this kind of cartoony looking fire-eyed guy in the background of these scenes. So it does feel to me the antagonism here has fallen by the wayside a little bit. For maybe that's the price we pay to get all these tower politics, which have been really interesting, and it's cool to get a vision in that world. It doesn't. I don't feel like we have a good sense of the stakes that we're rushing into here. It just kind of feels like now it's time to get to the eye of the world. We need to go confront the Dark One. Because this is the opportune moment. But the Trollocs have disappeared. The Fades have disappeared. They're not camped around Tar Valon in the same way that they are Caemlyn, where they need to leave the city to save the lives of 500,000 people and prevent the start of another Trolloc war here. They've got to like bait them and go to the Dark One himself. So yeah, I guess, which is to say in closing, this was an episode where it's like I was up a roller coaster ride every scene with twists and turns, unexpected changes and additions and things from the next book or from the prequel book all being brought into here, and moments I really love and others that I was really baffled by. I had the most, I think, I enjoyed it and definitely had the most mixed feelings on this one, I think, of any of the episodes so far, where I'm like ready to be like, okay, well, if you stick the landing, I'll accept everything going on here. I'm here for the grand finale. I think it's going to be really cool to see what the ways look like and if they capture the horror of those sequences in the novel pretty well. What do you two think about how you're feeling about this episode, the show so far, and going into our set of finale episodes here?
Yeah, I'm also had mixed feelings about it. I do have a question. So they said Siuan was having dreams, though. So is she actually having dreams about Balsamon the same way that Matt and them are, or is she really having a vision?
I don't remember the specifics of the scene well enough.
You said
Nick?
Siuan's having dreams, you said? Oh, I don't remember. Did they say that in the episode last night they did?
Yeah, when she's talking to Moiraine, she said, I've been having dreams. The same dream over and over, that he's at the eye of the world and he's weak. Her actual dialogue is like pretty fucking confusing because at one point she says he's weak and another point she says he's really fucking strong, so I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, she said she's having dreams of him. And Moiraine freaked the fuck out when the boys were. But she was just like, okay. So that's why I wonder, like, she's used the word dream, but is it a vision?
Yeah, I don't, because also, like, in the books they talk about, I think in the first one too, they talk about how, like, everyone starts having these, like, bad dreams in certain places where the Dark One touches more, so maybe it's an allusion to that. I don't know, that's a good question.
She does bring up on the prophecy front, was this the first time in that scene with the two of them that they explicitly mention that Moiraine and Siuan were there when an old Aes Sedai named Gitara Moroso had a foretelling so powerful that she knew the dragon is born. Like, right this minute, it just happened. It's like, you know, I'll behold the angel like appearing to the very kind of moment. And then she was such a big and shocking vision that she keeled over dead after giving that foretelling. So these were the only two who witnessed it. And I assume that was the lead into the dreams discussion. I am looking back over and remembering now. Oh, right. And Moiraine repeats her promise that she's going to kill the kids herself before she lets the Dark One have them. So reestablish that.
She's questioning if they've been interpreting that vision this whole time incorrectly, because she says, like, you know, well, it's been, you know, retranslated or reinterpreted by everyone for how many fucking years. So, you know, whisper down the lane, maybe what we're saying now is not what she actually saw. And then Siuan's like, but you were fucking there. And so I think that's like the lead in then to her saying that she's also having these like dreamy whatever things. But it just, there's a couple discrepancies with Siuan's characters that I just wasn't sure if it's supposed to be visions, because someone also, I'm on the subreddit, someone also pointed out that the scene with Nynaeve and Egwene meeting Siuan does not fit her character if we're supposed to believe that she's really intimidating, because Nynaeve fucking backtalks her the whole time and she just like smiles at it. So it's like, you know, there's a little bit of a discrepancy as far as, you know, what she actually believes or is doing. I kept
expecting Siuan to use the one power in that scene. I don't know if that was just me. Yeah, like demonstratively.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and in terms of like final thoughts too, I think that I think the series is turning out to be fun for me as like someone who read the books and like expecting it. I don't know how actual television viewers are and whether or not they're too excited about it though, just because I feel like there are lots of things that we're picking apart that I think even if we hadn't read the books are a little bit unfortunate. So yeah, I guess to me it's like it's a fun series to watch, and I'm glad we get the chance to see it. But there are some disappointments along the way.
Right. And for the people who haven't read the books, there are some advantages too, in that they're probably not particularly upset about Loyal's lack of makeup or costume or size or or camera work highlighting there. It's such an interesting thing they have to thread with this show of being appealing to a fan base that is large, but not large enough that you can just cater the entire time. And you've got to update the story ways. You've got to tell something that people are going to be able to follow if they haven't read the book. So I'm pretty impressed overall with their handling of that task, I think. And I think that they are, however I feel about any of the individual decisions, I get a sense of there is a lot of thoughtfulness going into every decision and every episode and the way that they are choosing to weave this story in and the mysteries they're presenting and what's changing. And I don't know how much is that because I've never been in recent years this plugged into a show like where I'm reading articles that you're sending me, Keeley, or the Ask Me Anythings with the director, or looking in the X-Ray bonus content and thinking about it every week and talking with y'all every week and picking it apart in these really discrete ways. But the flip side of being so nitpicky about everything is that it's giving me such an appreciation for how much work has gone into deciding all of this and into putting all this together, building this world and putting it on screen, which one way or another, however it turns out, I have really enjoyed seeing it come to life in that way. And especially for, we've harped again and again on how good these actors are and how well cast and how cool it is having like the faces to put to all of that visually here. So next time, as a reminder, we'll be reading chapters 46 to 53 of The Eye of the World, the last 8 chapters of the book. And then we'll be watching next Thursday in our time, episode 7 of the show, our second to last TV episode. It's hard to believe we're already there and leading right up to our holiday break. This episode of WOTCast was produced by yours truly. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Caleb Wimble. Keeley, where can people find you?
On Twitter and Instagram at Keeley_Reed.
Nick, thanks so much for joining us again. It's awesome having you on every time, and hopefully we'll get to have you back at least for the finale or around that time. We need to talk about the end of the show and the end of the season once we get there, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you allowing me to jump on and nerd out about Moiraine Swan.
The looks that launched 1,000 ships. I would be curious to log on to AO3 or fanfiction.net and see the jump in stories there, because they have been shooting up for some of the other characters in recent weeks, and I bet they're going crazy about this particular reveal. Remember, you can find us all at WOTCast.net, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at WOTCast Podcast, and support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast. You can also support us for free by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your podcast platform of choice. Helps a lot. It's the number 2 way we find new listeners. The number 1 way is to tell a friend about the show. Word of mouth means the world to us, and even just, a single share on social can make a huge difference in the number of listeners for a given episode, and who will keep on listening along. That's all for today. Thanks so much for listening, folks. And remember, this is not the ending. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Time, but this is an ending. Farewell.